A lot of you hanging on. We'll go right to our phone calls. First up is Frank in Oklahoma. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Hank. Thank you so much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
This fellow I was listening to, he was basically going over Catholicism and paganism, which I'm pretty familiar with a lot of that information he covered. But then he threw a curve at me, and he talked about Islam and paganism, and then basically he was talking about Masonic degrees and the Bible and the Quran, and then bringing it all down to Satan worship, Sit and Isis, and the comparison of Mary and Isis and the Indian deities, and all these towers of Babel, and Mary being on some of these things. And he was big on symbolic comparisons between cathedrals and mosques, and he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I know they're big into prophecy and trying to communicate what might happen in the future. What is your opinion on just basically, he was saying the secret society behind Catholicism and Islam is basic Satan worship that comes out of Rome?
Yeah, well, look, Catholicism can be judged upon its own merits as Islam should be judged upon its own merits. The problem I see is not with that. I mean, when you misrepresent a religion, whether it's Buddhism or Islam or Mormonism or the Jehovah's Witnesses, you're doing everybody a disservice. You have to rightly communicate what they communicate and then use their deviations as springboards or opportunities for sharing the truth of the gospel. But you can't do what so many modern-day prophecy pundits are doing, and that is to say that these very things or these very institutions are talked about in the book of Revelation, which is what many of these teachers are doing. For example, the whore of Babylon, according to Tim LaHaye, is the Roman Catholic Church. And the Seventh-day Adventists have their own Armageddon Incorporated enterprise going as well. And by the way, I can tell you from personal experience that I have encountered many Seventh-day Adventists over the years. They always wait for me at the end of a speaking engagement and tell me I've taken the mark of the beast because I'm worshiping on Sunday. But that's another story. The point here is simply to say that if you're reading Revelation, you can't read Roman Catholic Church into the whore of Babylon. That's despicable. That's a misrepresentation. And if you look at how this is being done in modern-day evangelicalism, it is simply breathtaking. Because what's going on here is flights of subjective fancy. It's not reading Scripture in light of Scripture, which we are compelled by Scripture to do. That's what the Reformers talked about when they talked about the analogy of faith. You can't understand the whole of Scripture without understanding its individual parts, nor its individual parts without understanding the whole of Scripture. And you want to think about prostitution in the Scripture. Jerusalem, over and over again, is communicated as a prostitute that had little interest in seeking intimacy with God in His temple. Instead, as the prophets of old talked about in the Old Testament, she craved intimacy with foreign gods on the threshing floors of perverse temples. And as with Hosea, Israel as the prostitute is communicated through the prophet Jeremiah. And you go back to the language, it is chilling and it is explicit. In fact, the portrayal of Jerusalem as a prostitute is even more brazen in Ezekiel. Ezekiel says the prostitution of Jerusalem made that of her sisters Samaria and Sodom look insignificant by comparison. The depiction that you have in Ezekiel, again, is so graphic that I hardly dare read it on radio. So the very idea now that you're going to take Ezekiel and you're going to draw a parallel to an institution, whatever you might want to say about that institution in the present, is simply wrong-headed. You just look at the self-evident parallels to Revelation and Ezekiel. In fact, Revelation is a virtual recapitulation of Ezekiel, from the 4 living creatures, to the mark on the foreheads of the saints, to the eating of the scroll, to the measuring of the temple, to Gog and Magog, to the river of the water of life, and even that but scratches the surface. A Sunday school child with Bible in hand can find 100 or more parallels on a quiet Sunday afternoon if, in fact, people are reading the Bible.